All right, we are here with Cris Ashburn. Thank you so much, Cris, for taking the time to sit down and talk with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to have you go ahead and do like a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Okay. So, simple question. No. So obviously that's my name, Cris Ashburn. I am a death midwife, certified death midwife, a psychic medium. I am an ancestral worker, ancestral priestess. I have been priestess twice over through Luxunis Sisterhood, or the Luxunis Temple, and also my own family one, which I am a generational pagan. And I do services for people. I help people with connecting with their ancestors, with building their practices. Um, I do energy forecasts. I'm on Patreon. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. You pick it, I'm there. And yeah, I guess the main thing that really is my goal with stuff is just to have people feel empowered and reconnected and come from a place of authenticity, basically.
And love.
Yeah, and always love, always heart space. That was something that growing up was a really big core practice within my family. And so, like, if it's not from heart space, it ain't it.
Basically. Yes. One of the things I really like about you that I can feel even through the screen from you is that really caring and loving thing. So going about that, one of the things I've seen you talk about recently is self-care as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the things that you do and services you offer even can help a lot of women with that. Like, how do you think that can maybe help some of us, kind of do that a little bit better and more?
I feel like people in general, but women especially, since this is what we're talking about, so much in society it's rush, 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 right? And got to get everything done, and and so we can become so involved in serving others, especially as women, but also because the caretaker kind of role that's traditionally taken. And I think we can become so like output that we don't take time to input. And it's actually a shame because I think, everyone has that ability to be more intuitive, to be receptive to things, to sit and reflect and kind of recharge. And a lot of the stuff with self-care that I talk about is things like, checking in with yourself and recentering and regrounding and making sure that you're doing the little things for you. And kind of noticing those warning signs when you're starting to feel kind of resentful or overwhelmed, or, you're kind of lashing out a little bit, or, or like you're just flat out exhausted and can't think straight. And, I work within the realm of paganism, but really that goes across the board for anyone. We do better for ourselves and others when we are coming from a place where we are rested and centered and able to give whatever our best is, And so I think that it can change a lot of things. It can change the depth of the service that you give, and it can change the depth of which yourself on a level too, because you're able to be aware of and listen to your body and your mind and your emotions when it's trying to tell you something instead of sort of repressing things.
So really helping people to read their own energy and read and just be more intuitive.
Yeah. Instead of sort of fighting it and having to fit ourselves in the current of things, listen to the current that's naturally within us, and we will be in that current.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So one of the things I know we briefly talked about before was your pagan background. And I think that what you were just talking about, that goes hand in hand, reading the energy, and something that I've noticed working with the land and with the animals, all of that goes together.
Yeah.
And So what's your understanding or definition of pagan, or what have you come across people's viewpoint is, I guess, of it?
Okay. So pagan to me is a phrase that is basically, it goes down to country dweller, pretty much. And nowadays it's used very much as sort of this umbrella term for subcategories underneath of that. Different religions and spiritualities that are basically not Christian, pretty much. Now, there are ones that are kind of in the middle that I think some people put under pagan, and though they themselves would not claim to be pagan. But as I see it, oftentimes pagan is put for basically the people who are working closely with sort of earth-based religions or spiritualities, things that are more in tune with the cycles of the land or the animals, or things like that, and paying attention to that flow, as opposed to sort of maybe looking to a higher power that is outside of nature or outside of sort of the framework of nature within like the physical sense of that.
Right. What do you think somebody could be both pagan and Christian at the same time?
I think that Christian also has like a broad spectrum under it too.
Yeah.
We usually say Christian like it's a specific thing, but there's actually a lot of different stuff underneath of Christian.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that it depends on that, because there are like, the Christians who blend things like the triple god with the triple goddess and things like that. And so they kind of follow this, but they also follow that, and they blend it together. And I mean, like, I think if it works for you, it works for you. Like I said, religions and spiritualities, like, it's not one or the other. And so if you want to mix and match, as long as respect is given to the cultures that you're pulling from or the specific religions that you're learning from, like, yeah, why not? I mean, it's not my personal thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I asked that because I have a friend who actually was a very pagan and now is Christian, but is also going back to his pagan roots. So we had a conversation about that recently.
Yeah.
And his stance is God gives him everything, that the land, created everything. So
yeah,
just kind of a different perspective, I guess. But so your background, you said your mom was pagan and your dad was Southern Baptist.
Yeah. So my mom is pagan, my dad was Southern Baptist. Yeah. So I grew up in a mixed religion household with the ability and the freedom, which I was blessed with, and I acknowledge that fully, to explore different cultures, religions, things like that interested me. And so like from a pretty young age, I realized that there really wasn't a thing as like one true, because both of my parents had two very different perspectives, right? And so, and then, I would ask other people, and then their perspectives were different, because my father, for being a Southern Baptist, was one of those Christians who are very much like, I don't have to go to a garage to be a car, so I don't need to go actively to church to be a Christian. Like, it's my deeds and what I do. And so for that, like, that also brought up another thing there where I was like, wait a minute, but these people over here have a different definition of Christian. And you know what I mean? So pretty young, I started looking into that. And I remember being fascinated by like Egyptian beliefs and, cultures. And like my mom had like a book this big, because I was also homeschooled from about 5th grade up. And my mom left a book like this big on the dining room table, which was her mistake. And it was on Egyptian beliefs and culture and such. And she was going to piece it out into chapters so that I could work through it slowly. And I kind of took it upstairs to my room and read it overnight. So there went those subjects for the next few months. But it was just something that I was just really, really interested in from a young age, because it was around me. And yeah, I mean, like, there were definitely the dialogue of like, well, this is the one true thing, and this is, that stuff is bad, or this is, and that's bad. Because the thing is like, within a Christian stance, you can look to people who are pagan as bad. And then within the pagan stance, a lot of times people who are pagan came from Christianity because it's a very dominant belief system in this country. And so then they have sort of a bitterness towards Christians a lot of times, or
Right.
sort of like like shadows involved in that. And so, whether reasonably or not, right? But either way, like, so I was able to observe that on both sides and kind of be like, if you guys are both doing this, then like, that's not really the answer either, is it?
Right.
And so I don't know, I guess I was kind of like the walking in the middle, exploring things for a while. And my mom was someone who would ask a lot of questions, but like if I asked her something, she would ask me another question instead of giving me an answer. And that caused me to have a very inquisitive mind and to kind of question everything. I mean, that was her whole thing. Question everything, even if I myself have said it, which is like a Buddha quote, I believe. So yeah, like it was interesting growing up with the two, because I would, go to church, and like I was like a number one Bible drill student. Knew it by heart. And then that night I would go home and I would like have a bonfire under the full moon with my mother and her, coven sisters and such, and throw boons in the fire. You know what I mean? Like, so it was an interesting world. But to me, even though other people were like, nope, this is a line and it's black and white, I didn't see it that way because I was the in-between. So it wasn't a line there for me. Why can't you explore those things? Why can't you learn about them?
Yeah, that is, most of it's a gray area. That black and white line that so many of us draw, it just divides us. And that's so important. So how important was it for you as a child growing up? You said 11 siblings, right? You're one of 11, the youngest?
Yeah, I'm the youngest.
To be able to have that kind of freedom and have somebody that you could go to and see both sides, like,
It was really empowering. I think that I heavily credit the fact that I was given the freedom to explore that. And make decisions for myself on that once I was old enough to kind of like be like, okay, this is what I've decided. I heavily accredit that to sort of the fact that I am so deeply rooted in my practice today as an adult. The fact that I was given space, and that I did have people that, if I had this weird dream or something and I'm like, what the hell does this mean? I could go to my mom and be like, hey, so I dreamed of this thing and there was a snake in the road and I don't know, and da-da-da, and it talked to me telepathically. And instead of my mom being like, that's weird and you need to come to Jesus, she was kind of like, interesting. So what do snakes mean to you? What kind of road was it? How did you feel? Like, again, that meeting with more questions. And with my dad, he was someone who didn't partake in the sort of the spooky end of things. So like I was, I've said that I'm a medium. So from a very young age, like I was in the cradle talking to spirits in my room alone. And because of that, he was someone who like was kind of weirded out by it, but he didn't push me away or shun me about it. He was just kind of like, and like I recognized that as sort of a fear in him, and that's why he was uncomfortable. So I just didn't bring it up around him, unless he was having an argument because a door kept popping open or something, and he's like, they keep popping that door open, and I'm like, well, it's because of this. Like they're telling you to stop doing this, And then I would say something, but overall, like we just didn't bring that part up much, and so I was also kind of taught how to respect someone else having a different viewpoint or belief, and their level of comfortable, and how to coexist with that.
That's a really, really important point. Because I'm trying to impart that on my daughter, because she has been talking to spirits since she could talk.
Yeah. Yep.
But I remember as a child,
they're the best people to play with in your room. I'm telling you.
I'm telling you, I've got pictures of her and videos of her. I'm getting goosebumps when I even think about this, but I had a son that passed away before I had her.
Mm-hmm.
And on his actual birthday, she had a birthday party for a little boy that she was playing with. Because you can't deny stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's just those pieces that you just are undeniable.
When I was younger, we lived out in this it was like land through our cousin, and it was like a bunch of trailers and stuff. My mom was just trying to get on her feet, and I remember we had lived in a house just before that. I was really little, like maybe like 2 or 3, I think. And as my mom tells it anyway, because I don't remember, she says that when I was at the house, I was always talking to someone, and I would say this really old fashion name, like a name you do not hear often. And as soon as we moved, I never talked about her again. And it was stuff like that a lot, or like my mom blaming my brothers for jumping on the bed, but they're outside playing, and meanwhile I'm in there like, but not on the bed, just like hanging out.
Right. My daughter, she took a picture. One day I wasn't feeling good, and I was laying in the bed. So I'm type 1 diabetic since I was 7 years old. But so I wasn't feeling good. She was like maybe 5 or 6. She'd just gotten an iPad, but she was always talking to other people.
Yeah.
And I really realized it, and it kicked in when she talked to somebody that she was close to that passed, and then she did it again. But then she went out and took this picture, and I still have it on my phone, but it was all these different colored lights in a hallway that was dark, and said, all the spirits are here to help you, make you feel better. Come look, mommy. And I was like, baby, I can't get it. I was half asleep, and it was super early in the morning. Her dad had just went to work, and she showed me that she took a picture, and it was there. Like, and that makes me go back to when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, I saw shadows in our backyard. And I remember talking to the angels that would rub my back at night. Because I grew up in Ohio, so in the Mound Builder area.
Okay.
Did you grow up in Ohio? No, you live in Ohio now.
No, I live in Ohio now due to my husband being here.
Okay.
I'm actually originally from Virginia, out on the water.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Newark originally. My dad came to Chillicothe. We came out here. Yeah. But the land, there was a lot of Native American history there. And I would always see this stuff in my backyard every single day. But since I grew up in a very, very Christian, Seventh-day Adventist actually, and no disrespect to them, there's some amazing people, but I got told to shut that down and turn it off.
Yep.
I know you said your dad was kind of open. Was there ever a point in your life where you had to shut it off?
No, I mean, there were times where I could tell that other people weren't comfortable with it. And so I just wouldn't bring it up around them. But I still continued to feel it and like talk, because like to me, I had been talking to these people, playing with these people, like my ancestors, even beyond just like, spirits who were coming and going, but like my ancestors, that was my family. So that's like my dad telling me not to talk to like, my uncle. You know, like I'm still going to talk to like your family and their family. I'm not going to do that. And so there wasn't a time where I shut it down or I felt the need to shut it down or even I wanted to shut it down. Like, the whole kind of like, I'm different and I don't want to be different, so I'll shut everything down. Instead, my approach was I'm different and I don't want to be different. And so I'm going to like double down. I became, the tomboy that just was like real blunt and told everybody what she thought. Like I became that instead. But when it came to spirit stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I knew what it felt like to be in bed at night and have something pestering you and you didn't know what it was. And people who can't see or speak to them feel like that all the time when you bring it up.
That's a good point.
And that recognition was, I think, something that was the reason that I was like, I'm not going to bring it up to them. Like, just because I'm seeing something or just because I know something does not mean I have to tell you. Just because I'm standing here talking to someone and their grandma is talking about her, the new shoes that they got, like that doesn't mean I have to deliver that message. I can, but I don't have to. And if you are someone where I get that feeling that you're just not going to be open to it, like one of my brothers does not want to know any of it. He's like, that's fine. And it's interesting in what you do. And I support you, but like, don't ever tell me. And I'm like, that's fine. I can respect that. It's like being in bed and having that over you because they can't see or hear it.
Was there ever a point where it was just too overwhelming for you?
There were times where I would call out to the ancestors. There were times where I would call to them for protection. But I don't know if I would say that that's too overwhelming because, again, I didn't shut it down, right? So I didn't hide it. So if anything, I guess there were times where I realized that I felt like I couldn't do it. And so I reached out to them. I think I would even reach out to them before I reached out to my mom. And then I'd go to her in the morning,
Yeah. Do you think that your mom's like open-mindedness and encouraging you and asking you the questions is what gave you the strength to do that and feel comfortable with that?
I think on some level, yeah. I think it's that, and I think it's also, again, the ancestors. Like I hate to sound like a broken record here, but like I just that connection is very, very deep for me. It always has been. And so like if you stripped everything away in my practice, I would still have them. Like you can take all the candles, you can take all the prayers, you can take all the spells, you can take everything, you can take deities, you can take everything. Still gonna have the ancestors. Like they're in my DNA. Yeah. And so like for me, I think that's part of that is that idea that I am just so intricately wired into them and like the continuation of them and grateful for them and like empowered by them that like I didn't reach a point where I was like, I can't do this. Instead, I was like, I'm going to do this with you. Like I need help. And my mom, I think her openness was really, really good about that. I mean, she was someone who loved to read. She still is. She like there's wall-to-wall books in the house and like floor to ceiling. And like to the extent that people can't be like, have you read blah, blah, blah to me? Because I'm like, what does the cover look like? Because like it very well could have also been something that was just sitting in the house that my mom had and I picked up and just started reading. Like, because literally it was floor to ceiling. Like the whole dining room basically should have just been a library. But like, and it's not just spiritual books, like it was like medical and, she was very big into herbalism, hypnotherapy, like all of this kind of stuff, philosophy stuff, like psychology, And so I think that was part of it too, is like she had and still has a very eager to learn mind. she was a questioner. Like, even as a child, she was a questioner. That's how she became pagan, you know? And so I think she just passed that on to me. I think she was like, hey, do what you want. Just, you know, make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And instead of approaching something out of fear, she approached it out of curiosity. And I think that is a big part of what empowered me to react the way that I did to the fact that I could see spirits and, you know, things like that. I also maybe just how I react to the world in general, you know?
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't until somebody in my family I'm very close to had a near-death experience and then shared with me that he was very, I mean, like I got sent to psychologists and doctors for years and years and years as a child. But he had a near-death experience and then shared with me that he was able to suddenly see what I was able to see. And being given that permission was able to kind of give me back that ability to allow myself to tap into that. So do you think like just having that permission from a young child for you was...
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. I also think too, though, like in you telling that story, it's bringing up a memory of my own that, so something I guess I should mention in this is I never called myself a medium really until I was in my late 20s because I didn't see it as mediumship. I know that to someone else outside looking in, you guys are probably like, yeah, that's mediumship.
I still don't even say that about myself. Like, so yeah, no.
But to me, it was ancestral work. To me, it was ancestral work. It was spirit work. Like that's just, it was part of the beliefs and what we did, and you know, the drummings and the, like, it was just part of that. And so I didn't see it as like something that was like this, you know, medium as like the title. And I think once I started realizing that that title is how people would describe at least part of my practice and part of my abilities, I think that was a challenge for me, funny enough, because suddenly I was like, I don't think I work the way you guys do. Like, because I didn't discover it in that way. Like, I wasn't like, I'm going to be this, let me go learn. Or like, I had this big epiphany moment and something happened, or, you know, near life death experience or something. And so like, that's just what I've done. And I kind of learned it on my own. And so my foundations might be different. My phrasing might be different, you know, but like, this is what I do, you know? And so I think that was actually something that I had a challenge with, is the word, because, and not the word itself, but the word in the context of the community and sort of the markers or standards that they use to define that and talk about it, like the language there and that kind of thing. That was something where I was like, I don't know about all that, but like, this is what happened. You know? And it took me a little while, and that reminded me of like, I had instances where, you know, I would get pulled to go to a store, and I didn't need anything from the store, but I was pulled to go there, so I went there because I listened. And then before I know it, I'm talking to the two girls at the counter who everyone else, funny enough, is not shopping today. It's just me. And I'm reading them basically. Like, you know, I ask first because consent, but I just start doing that. And, or like, you know, I have a day off and I think, oh, finally I get a day off. I can relax. And I go to a friend's house to have a little party, and I meet his girlfriend, who I only know the first name of, and I end up telling her about how her grandfather died and what happened there, because it was an unsolved case, and giving her details that were only on that, and had no idea even her last name. And then it was kind of like, all right, so look, maybe I don't use the phrasing But like this is definitely happening in those ways now where like I'm just meeting people and things are happening. It's outside of my family and friends and sort of coworker, you know what I mean? And so that was actually something that was like I guess a turning moment for me of realization and sort of validation in that of like which probably sounds silly because it's like, well, it's not that I didn't think what I was doing was real because obviously that's my experience. It was more so that I didn't realize that it worked within the framework of other people's terms. Like
Yes.
that, like in the world, it was legitimate, right? I just thought it was just legitimate to me and my family, and that's just what we did.
Yes. That resonates so much with me because I had never went up to anybody ever in my life until one night I was at a Roosters with my ex-husband. I had a glass of wine or something like that. Mm-hmm. So my guards were down. And when we were leaving, there was this guy. And
alcohol will help.
Well, it did. I mean, that night, I had had several things before, but I'd never went up to talk to anybody ever. Mm-hmm. And even since then, I've very rarely done it. Mm-hmm. But just, I went up to him and I was able to talk to him and say, I don't know why I need to talk to you, but do you feel your dad in the mornings and at night? And he stands on the side of the bed and you had this chest and he stands on the left side of it and he mm-hmm. passed away and there was this car and like the whole thing. This mm-hmm. day, his birthday was, I believe it was August or September and his passing was August or September. It was one of those two. It was so many years ago.
Yeah.
But that was a very validating moment. But what would you say to people that haven't taken that leap of faith when they've had those pulls yet? Would you encourage them to do it?
Yeah, well, I would say small steps first, right? Because what happens in those moments with anxiety and things like that is our brain wants proof. Our brain is a giant computer and it just wants proof of things.
Yeah.
And so if you listen to it and don't do anything, then proof isn't pertained. If anything, you've just given it proof that that's not the truth, right? So instead, what I would do is encourage maybe not to just walk up to somebody or something, but to like take the small steps. So like, for instance, the day that I was driving and decided to go to that store, I literally could have left turned to go home. And instead I went straight and then left turned into the parking lot to go to that store. In that moment, setting at that light before turning, or choosing what lane, I was like, nope, I'm getting this urge. I'm just going to listen. And those are the things that I would encourage them to start doing first. Like, listen to those little pulls, or like what I like to call the walk-bys, like drive-bys, but like they're the walk-bys who like, it's literally like they're walking behind you and giving commentary, like just tossing it to the side as they, go on. And you will have those moments where that happens, whether you hear it physically or feel it or whatever it is for you, like the walk-bys, when they start doing that, like listen to them sometimes. If they're like, oh, I can't decide which thing to get the basil. Like, just get the basil. There's small things that aren't these giant leaps, but they're going to cause you to give your brain proof that there are things in that if you follow it. It's sort of, it's not a coincidence. It's a path to empowerment. It's a path to validation. And if you follow that urge, you'll get more of that. You'll get more proof, And in those moments, look, not everybody always gets everything 100 either. Like, like you were saying, I saw you, there's a chest and he's standing to the left and blah, blah, blah. Let's say he was standing to the right. That person is still probably going to be pretty grateful for that thing. Also, sometimes spirits will piggyback each other, which is so annoying, guys. But
I know,
piggyback each other, and it's like they try to shove two things in one feed, and it's like you're blending this, and I need you to stop because you're kind of like discombobulating things. But in those moments when you're still learning like what that is, there's going to be moments where you're blending even, and like people are like, oh well, this doesn't work, but this did, and this actually over here applies to this other person, but like both of them together they do have a connection. And so like I try to tell people, like, you're the Rolodex for the message. Like, stop trying to control the message.
So how'd you learn to tell the difference for you?
Trial and error. Trial and error, and listening to the ancestors again, because so my great grandmother is sort of a bouncer, basically. You could call her my spiritual bouncer. And so she kind of like, literally will just, this very squat, broad woman, just, you know what I mean, at people. Yep. Scorpio. And and she would she would check people in life, and she checks people now. And so there's that element. So I look to like what her response is. And then I've got my dad and my grandmother, who are both very much the people greeters. My grandmother's up there with the fruit cakes, you know what I'm saying, like that kind of energy. Cancer. And my
grandma's Cancer. Yep.
Yeah. And so like she, just wants everybody to come on in and make a coffee and blah, blah, blah. And so one of the things that I do is a lot of mediums work with sort of a guide, and that's, their sort of translator.
Mm-hmm.
So my ancestors are my translators.
What do you think people should do if they don't feel like they've found that translator or been able to really figure that part out? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that have a lot of intuitive nature, but they just don't quite know how to handle it or interpret it or filter it. You know what I'm saying?
Ask questions. Take actions. Don't sit and ponder, and then you're sitting still and not doing anything. That doesn't help. You don't learn anything from just like not interacting with it. If you're all in here trying to figure out the angle to attack it, you never attack it. And so like the learning is in the doing, which is things like I was saying, taking those little moments to seize it. And in terms of finding a guide and things like that, I mean, are you meditating? Are you doing journey work? Are you centering and grounding? Are you watching your energy? Because as people who are working with energetic beings, right? We need to also be aware of our own energy within that and how that interacts. And so I also think, and that's something I guess too, I should say, is probably part of how I learned that now that we're talking about this, because so as a teen, my mother and I would go to a lot of different healing modality classes. So like Reiki and quantum touch and Donna Eden's energy medicine.
I love Donna Eden. She's amazing. Yes, I love her stuff. Yes.
Yeah, the 5-minute thing and like the zip up, and I still do a bunch of that to this day because it helped so much as a kid. Now I will say, in terms of being overwhelmed, it wasn't the spirits that were overwhelming me, it was my empathy, and the psychic end of things that overwhelmed, not the spirits. The spirits were chill.
It was what you were feeling yourself that was overwhelming.
It was what I was taking in when I would go to public places. So like restaurants were incredibly difficult for me. Concerts actually weren't once the concert started, because everyone was focused on the concert. They weren't focused on each other. They were focused at one single spot. And so it was easier for me. But before the concert, when everybody's like milling around, getting into their place, yes, that was a lot. Going to restaurants and trying to sit and read a menu was incredibly difficult for me, because I would basically have panic attacks because I couldn't focus.
I can't tell you how much I resonate.
I'm picking up like five booths down, they're having a fight, and this kid's overwhelmed, and and then their ancestors are over here, and like it was just meanwhile, my mom's just like, did you pick what you want to eat yet? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I can't even see the word.
I see my daughter go through that, and I still go through that. I leave my house once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I still cannot walk it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, with everything happening nowadays, right? and everybody being kind of like in their house more and all of this. I think that when there is a different normalcy that we come to, because it won't be the normal that we knew, I think that we're going to have a lot of people struggling with that end, because I think people didn't even realize how used to shielding to some degree or desensitized to it they become.
Yes.
And now going back out, it's even more exaggerated.
Yes.
Right? And so it's like now we've got people who probably didn't even notice that they had those abilities being like, what is going on? I am so drained. I am so overwhelmed. I'm anxious. Yeah. I feel like I'm just going to like explode. Yeah.
Right.
I'm overheating, you know, all of that. Like, yeah. Because for me, it would be overheating. My hands would start sweating. I would start shaking. My vision would get blurry, like tunnel vision. And the only way I could do anything with that is I learned to start, and it was a trick that my grandfather taught me when I was really young. And he didn't teach me it for this, but thanks for looking out, Grandpa. He taught me it to cool down. Okay. But I was like, oh, I bet that would still work, because again, at this time, like, you know, I'm preteen now, so like we're starting to take energy classes and things like that.
Learning to read energy.
Yeah. So, well, he wasn't. I was, but yeah. He was like, oh, you're overheating, because their house didn't have air conditioning and anything, right? So
he just didn't realize it.
Exactly. When you would overheat at night, you would go to the faucet with the cold water and you would run it on your veins. And I would let it run down my hand, because I have healer hands, is what we call it.
My great aunt taught me that.
Yeah. So like that's a purging method, right? For energy, it's clearing. And so that was one of the few things that when I was in a restaurant I would do. I'd be like 12, like, oh my God, just please. You know, and then when I came back, you know, I could sit down and kind of read, you know, because I would be more prepared. But that was something that I was taught really young, because they didn't have air conditioner. And so I would get hot and they'd be like, well, this is how you cool down. But really what I was being shown was how to clear my energy.
Yeah. And that's the way of a lot of our ancestors who lived off the land and came out here. And I know you mentioned that your grandma was the wise woman or the healing woman.
My great grandmother. Yeah.
Great grandmother. I'm sorry. No, but so is that
my grandmother was as well, but in her own way. She was more of the hearth, which I guess you'd call her nowadays. Okay. She was more into the cooking element of things. She was the person who was like, everybody come in, I will always have a plate for you. Like, do you need any tea? Do you very, very much the Southern comfort kind of thing. And there was always lots of heart in her food. And that in itself was very healing. I think that's where her magic lied.
Her energy was.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a connection to physical healing and, I mean, all of that with the ancestry and like your health? Do you notice a difference? Like,
you mean like as in like that passed down?
Well, yes, that passed down and the ability to change or help people physically with their health by what you've learned or what's been passed down.
I think to some degree everyone is capable of it. First of all, I think everyone can. I don't think there's anything, because that's the thing too, is like when I say like hereditary witch or like generational witch or pagan, I think, because I go by either, it's fine, whatever. But I think a lot of people take that as like me saying natural born witch.
Right.
Where like my line is more special than somebody else's. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying all of our lines are special and we all have these innate gifts and this innate connection to everything. And I think just, you know, my line taught me about it from a young age, which I'm grateful for. But like, that doesn't mean it's not there for people. That doesn't mean that you can't learn it. It doesn't mean that you can't tap into it. It doesn't mean that you can't start listening to that, you know, that little pull that you feel. But yeah, like I think the energy work part of it though, for the teenager for me was a big shifter, because it connected my experience of things with the science of things. And the actual understanding of what energy is, and the fact that like everything that you think is solid isn't. it's vibrating.
So that takes me to the next question I actually had, which was, how important has sound? You mentioned drums earlier, and I know sound healing has been a huge thing for me and my experience, and I've noticed a lot more people talking about it. How has that influenced you and affected you?
Oh, sound is a big deal in my family. I mean, just like music alone, just music unto itself in a very like mundane sense also, I find very magical. I blend those anyway. But it's something that like, I mean, there are tapes of me at like 3 singing. And it's something that all my life that was my outlet, music or singing or something like that. A lot of people don't know, but actually during my teen years I was classically trained, so I can sing like Italian arias and stuff. I'm shy about it, but I can do it.
Oh, you got to make a video about that. I want to see it.
Maybe. But no, like I played guitar on and off since I was 13.
Wow.
I studied piano when I was younger. Like music is something that is more than just art. It's like soul. It's sound is able to bring out emotion and these different, literal vibration. And it changes our reaction to things. We want to naturally align with things automatically. Like it has so much power. And so, yeah, like, and as for the drummings, so those are things I do now actually, but growing up, my mother would always have monthly drummings. And so what that was is a new moon and full moon, or one or the other sometimes at different points in life, because she couldn't necessarily do both.
Right.
She would invite everyone to her home, and or we would go to other people's home from the group that volunteered, and we would drum the heartbeat. And it was to reconnect. So it wasn't sort of the like, when people think of drumming, they think of like a bunch of different rhythms together and people dancing around the fire. It wasn't that so much as more of a journeying thing, and a way to ground and recenter. And I mean, I have many, many, many fond memories from that. And also my own revelation around things with spirits and my abilities. And like, I first learned that I was a physical empath at a drumming because someone had a knee surgery and I didn't know, because she didn't have her brace on, like, and her jeans were pulled up over the bandaging. And I picked it up from her. She was sitting across from me in the circle and I picked it up. And then at the end, I was just like, I'm just going to ask, because again, listening to that nudge, I was like 12 or 13. And yeah, she was like, well, yeah, it was hurting, but now it's gone. Like, yeah, well, I know where it went. So I had to go out and learn how to ground that out and, get rid of that and, et cetera. But looking back, I think that was one of the reasons. My mom was already interested in energy work, but then she saw me doing this and she was like, she's going to need tools to like do something with that, like how to work that out. Otherwise she's just going to be in pain all the time.
That is exactly where I am at right now. I have a lot of physical stuff I feel from other people, but I see my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your best tool? Because I think a lot of people actually pick that up and don't realize that's where their pain is coming from, or where it's coming from. They just didn't get it.
And that's not to say don't get checked by a doctor if there is something serious.
Sure,
obviously. Like cover your bases.
Right.
But no, definitely. I think that there's a lot of times where like, a headache or something. Like my sister and I pass on migraine back and forth all the time. And we'll start yelling at each other like, keep it to yourself. But I guess my best tool with that is more of a mentality thing than an exercise.
Okay.
At a certain point, I had to look at it like, instead of shielding, like protecting and shielding off it fully, I looked at it as filtering. There's actually a video, it's a really old one, but it's on my channel about it. And I explain in it basically that what helped me is to basically see it as a filter so that things can come through, but it just filters out the things you don't want, which then as an empath, feeling disconnected is really harmful for us. So we want to be able, like, it's part of our safety to be able to touch and feel and be connected. And so sometimes protection or shielding can make us feel even worse because we're isolated off. And that doesn't help. That makes it worse. So then you like grab even more. And so if you do it as a filter instead, and you look at it as, this is not mine to carry, I am the channel for it. Meaning I am not where the water ends up. I am the bowl carrying it to the place to dump it out. And that also shifted it because there's this mentality, I think, with a lot of people who are like this of like, no, I need to take it on for you. And it's like, no, you need to move it for them. Ah. Taking it on and moving it are two different things. You can be the channel or like the pipe that the water moves through without it being on you. It can just go through you. You know? And that was less of a technique and more of the mentality of it, because I think it shifted it from me being like, oh, it's my responsibility to heal the world, and so I have to carry this weight, which then made me reluctant to purge it, whether I wanted to or not. Like, it's still like that subconscious thing of that blockage on there. Oh, I have such a hard time. Shifting it into the mindset of like, no, my job to heal is not to hold it, but to move it. I'm the transmuter, not its home. And I think that was a big one for me.
Yeah, no. So it wasn't like, oh, I have to carry this or clear this or do any specific thing, just allowing it to just flow through you.
Yeah, like I am not the healer. I am healing.
Do you feel like in that process, it also healed yourself?
Yeah, I think it gave me the ability to give myself that space again. I mean, I keep saying that about different things, but yeah, like the more we pressure ourselves, I think we're kind of doing ourselves a disservice a lot of times. Because then, you know, again, going back to that self-care thing, we're acting under a point of exhaustion or a point of stress. And how can we be in the flow to optimize moving this flow? Right? Because when we're doing that, we're really moving stagnant energy. We're really moving things that have built up or that have, you know, gotten all puddled up in. And so we're moving it. And so that to me was like I don't know, it was a moment for me that kind of shifted my outlook on things and made me realize that, one, I'm not the only one out there doing this, and so I don't need to do it all. Two, so, you know, I can give myself that space. Three, it's not my responsibility to do it. And I think that's another thing too. Like, just because it's there doesn't mean you have to move it. Also, some people don't want it moved. Let's be honest. Like, everybody's real quick to light a healing candle for people. But like, if they haven't requested it, what I usually do when I do that is I put it up in the ether. And if they ask for it or they want it, they can grab for it. But I'm not going to put it on them, because for me, some people want to sit in that or need to sit in that for themselves to learn whatever they need to learn to get through it. Yeah. And so sometimes it's not our job to take it for them.
It's a good point. We're so quick as
to fix it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but sometimes it doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, that's not even something I'd really ever even I really contemplated on that.
Yeah. And that's not to say that like offering healing to people or anything is bad, and like the intention is very good there, but it's just a matter of like, no, some people want to or need to sit in that right now. It's kind of like saying, oh, let's have you avoid doing shadow work. Like, no, that's a necessity to get through things, to grow.
Yeah.
On some level, whatever depth you do it in, you can't, the the crappy things in life, you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
are part of what make us uncomfortable. So we choose another method or another habit. And
Right.
sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes like that needs to just be there. I
Yeah.
mean, how else do we get swamps if not from stagnant water? And it becomes a full ecosystem of life.
Wow. That's a pretty profound statement. I like that. It really is.
Yeah. I don't know. But that's also part of the society thing. It's also part of like the healer logic thing in terms of society and what a healer does or looks like, right? We fix things.
Right.
But the thing is like, that's not
Always.
what is, yeah. And also your definition of fix might not be someone else's.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I know you have some nieces and nephews, like, what do you think is the most important thing to teach this next generation? I know that's like a big open-ended question.
Well, that just makes me kind of look to what I am teaching them currently.
Yeah.
I think we have a generation that is heavily looking back to the roots, trying to find who they are and trying to figure out how they can do it better. And I think that that's a lot of generations, not all of them, but that's a lot of generations. And I think especially right now, this generation seems very, very curious about like, what is the foundation and how can we build a stronger one,
Yeah.
And so I think honestly, one, the space for them to explore that, to instill that and know that they can have that space and that time to do that. But two, I know with my own nieces and nephews right now, like I have a niece that I'm mentoring at the moment, and then the one that lives with me as well, and both of them, I just encourage them to step outside of the box of what it needs to look like. In terms of practice, in terms of who they are, in terms of all of that. Like, who says? You know what I mean? Like, who says? Who says you can't do it that way? Sure. Try it. Why not? Like, if you're going to try it, this is something that my mother told me when I was younger. If you're going to try it, I would rather you try it with me so that you are in a safe space should something else happen. And like, I'm here should you need me. If you're going to try it, be with me when you try it. And, then in the future, if you want to try it outside of that, you at least have a basis on like what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I approach it with them. Is like, yeah, I mean, try it, but also like, know that I'm here. And that's the same thing I do with my priestessing, with my mentorship stuff is like, yeah, okay, let's experiment then. Let's think around that. If this method of approach isn't working for you, let's go this way, or let's go this way, or let's come down on it, or, and see what happens. Because if you're going to do that, I'd rather you have it, done around someone who's going to be able to see red flags or warning signs and let you know. So it's like someone working on, cooking on a stove for the first time and leaving the handle out, and it's a pot of boiling water. It's like, no, you turn that handle in, right? So you don't hit it. That's like a safety thing. But someone who's just learning wouldn't even see that handle.
So speaking of that, like people that might not have a mentor, what is like maybe one or two of the biggest warning signs that you would tell people?
In terms of like practice, or
I guess in terms of what they're bringing in and what they're trying to filter out. Like, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So like, you get so much extra energy and stuff, and it's hard to filter.
Yeah.
So what to listen to and what not to listen to, I guess those kind of things.
So one of those things I would say is if something is starting to, how do I word this? Okay.
It's hard to put it into words.
It is. Fear isn't necessarily something to run from. Fear is a lot of times an arrow pointing to where you need to go. But there are ways to do that while establishing yourself in a stable and safe way, meaning like research or going to people that you trust, and there are things like that. So I think like with the overwhelm of like people coming in and things like that, or stuff coming in general and picking up things, one of the red flags for me is like if you're starting to feel really drained and sick, and you are, and what I mean by sick is I mean like you're physically getting sick a lot. And I don't mean like once in a while because we met Debbie and Debbie had a sniffle. I mean like it's been like a month now and we're still like with a head cold and blah 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 and like all of this, and we've tried everything else and and we're just really tired and we're feeling kind of depressed and we're also blah blah blah. Like that would be one of my red flags. I would be like, okay, how's your warding? When's the last time you cleansed your energy? When's the last time you zipped up, Donna Eden? Like when is the last time you checked your basics? Because we can get so interested in propelling forward that we forget to cover our butts. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So one of the red flags is that, like, just being sick and tired all the time.
Yeah. So a lot of people are feeling like that with the pandemic. They go out, they come back, they start feeling like that. I know what the zip up thing is with the Donna Eden, and like I'll try and put a link to that video where she talks about that.
Yeah.
But you're talking about warding and all of this other stuff.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate just a little bit on each one of those, just briefly? Because I know it's like really can be really in depth, but
well, I mean, it depends on how in depth you do it. Like, so what I mean when I say like cleansing and wording and stuff like that is so
somebody that doesn't have any idea what we're talking about.
Right. So cleansing for me is a bunch of different things. Now, when I'm talking about the body, I'm talking about things like literally taking a shower. First of all,
that's so cleansing. Yeah.
Because even though it seems very like sort of mundane and you wouldn't think of it as the part of your practice, like I know for me, it completely resets you. And so like things like taking a shower. And if you're going to take that shower, do you have like mint or something in your shampoo? Do you have things like that, like herbs that are helpful that cleanse?
Salt scrub.
Yeah, salt scrub, things like that. There are so many things and ways that you can do that, which is why I say it depends on how elaborate you want to make it really. I think a lot of times when I'm saying words like cleansing and warding and protection, like people think of like, like a Charmed moment where everybody hands in fancy robes.
I kind of want to make it like digestible to people,
but it's actually more something that looks like taking a shower or a long bath with salts or mint tea. Again, I like mint. And like lemon and like that kind of thing.
Lemons are so powerful.
And in terms of lifting the spirit, sweet orange, lime, things like that, also in that citrus family, will break it up too. And when I'm talking about that draining and that sickness, it's again that stagnancy feeling. It's that crud and the weight of it. And so we're breaking it up. So anything that is like effervescent, that is like bright, that has that like pop to it is going to help shake that up and get it moving. But that would be one, like a simple way to cleanse. Another one is like literally to go outside and sand and let the wind run on you for a while, give it to the wind, like literally just 5-point, and just let it go. And that's also a great way to recharge too. But there are so like many simple ways to do things like that it doesn't need to be this elaborate thing. It oftentimes my practice looks like very simple stuff like that. Like, I see a rainstorm and I freak out. Me and my niece both. She gets stoked. We'll meet each other in the hallway on the way out because we're both about to go outside and run and play in the water.
How old is she?
She's 8. So like my
daughter's age.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, it's raining. And then everybody puts outside, like they're at 7. Sorry, 7. But yeah, so like we make that a moment of cleansing, but it's because it's a moment of joy and happiness. It's refueling. It's bringing in blessings. It's, you know what I mean? Like, you want to bless your house, put on some really good music, shake your butt and dance and laugh. Put on some really good stand-up comedy or something. Like, again, that breaking up that sort of stuckness and then infusing that sort of light into it in whatever way you want to take that word, helps to fill it so much that it's hard to be stuck.
So it's more about intention. It's more about the energy and your intention and the mindset.
Yeah. I like to say that really what magical practice is its intention and boots on the ground. And boots on the ground can look like a lot of different things.
Yeah, it can. Something I get really down about, because I love the sun, but, being in Ohio, we don't always get a lot of sun.
Mm-hmm.
I love the ocean. Oh, I love the beach. But we don't get that cleansing energy here.
That salt water back home was a big cleanser for me. Absolutely. Oh. To the extent that I bottled it and brought it home. I have bottles with it in there that I just hold.
Okay. So all right. So that brings up a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
Like, I was so drawn. I've always been drawn to the beach. Okay. California, Florida, Hawaii. It was so cleansing. I always felt the most amazing, recharged, best energy. But I come back here and I get this stagnant stuff, right?
Well, a lot of Ohio too has sort of like swampland and the glacier effects on it and stuff. Right. And so like the actual land has kind of a heaviness to it in a lot of places as well. Okay. Not everywhere, but a lot of it. And that's actually one of the first things I noticed when I moved here. Because in Virginia, and this again could be something that it's because I'm not born here. And so my experience might be different.
Sure.
But in Virginia, the music or the land sings to me. Like, as soon as I cross the line, I can feel it.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Ohio feels so heavy.
I get to Ohio and it's like very like dense. It's not necessarily bad.
Right.
But it's like very rock like dense. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's hard. It's hard to be around sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that also is part of why maybe it's so easy to get stuck to. Because there is a such thing as being too grounded sometimes. You can be so grounded that you can't extend and then you're kind of in a rut.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes I think Ohio and maybe something that happened with the land or maybe just the combination of that and the history of it or whatever, but I feel like it does have this sort of denseness to it. And in Virginia it's very, very lush.
Yeah.
And we have a little bit of everything. You go north and you get farmland. You go west and you get mountains, Shenandoah and everything. You go east and you have ocean. You go south and you get a little bit of swamp. Like it's kind of a combination of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I lived towards the ocean. I had water in 3 directions.
Great Lakes.
Well, no, that's Ohio. So I lived in like Chesapeake Bay area.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were still talking about Ohio.
No.
Okay.
Ohio has a different vibe. I mean, the Great Lakes are
they're not the same as the sea.
Yeah, like they definitely are the body of water. They definitely still have an effect. Clearly, I don't think anyone's gonna argue that the Great Lakes don't have an effect on the land, but. But they do have a different feeling. And I honestly think that some of it is the element of salt water. Because it brings sort of those negative ions into the air. And when I say negative, it doesn't mean bad in this case.
No, it's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's a big part of it too. Like I remember I would just go hang out at the beach by myself because where I grew up, I could just walk like maybe 3 minutes down the road, and there was like a little private beach that a neighbor had, and they would let me just go out on it and chill. And so, yeah, I miss that. But the salt water heals. It heals so much. There is a peace in the waves and the sound of that, and it's literally like a lullaby.
Yeah.
And I mean, also on that level, I do have a lot of fishermen, sailors, that kind of thing in my background. And we've, like, I think one of my surnames actually means at the ridges, which is like at the edge in England, of the coast. So but yeah, like it's definitely different, and I think it charges the air. And it feels different because of that. And maybe that's even what magnifies some of the singing or the talk. I don't know. I think when I was younger, I always assumed it was just because I grew up there, know? And like, so literally the bones of my ancestors were in that ground. And so maybe that was why I just heard it easier. And then I moved to Ohio, and Ohio does feel different. And there isn't that singing for me. Now, over time, I have connected. I've lived here for like 15 years now. So like I've been here for a while.
Yeah.
And I am more connected with it now. I do, but it's like in a totally different growing zone and like all kinds of things, it's totally different plants up here. And
yeah,
there are times that I do miss the Virginia forest, because it was something, the Virginia forest was like my friend. I could just walk into it and get lost for hours and I would be fine because I wasn't actually lost. Here, I had to learn that. I had to like build that camaraderie because I don't know the plants here. I don't know the landscape here as well, and the history as well, and that kind of thing. And maybe also too, it's because my immediate ancestors at least aren't in this ground, And so it definitely feels different. I don't think it's necessarily bad though. It was a learning curve for me, for sure. Yeah.
So what do you think that is the most important thing for people that have had to be kind of uprooted? Because like we have such a small but huge world, and people are moving and immigrating and all this stuff that are kind of displaced from where they grew up or where their ancestors were, and they don't feel like they can get that connection back. What do you think is the best way to help them feel connected again?
There's a couple ways. I think one would be a mindset shift, in the fact that something that I had to do as well is, instead of looking at your immediate ancestors, look at the macro of ancestors, and the fact that we are all on some level connected. I mean, there's like 6 key hominid women, and we're all from them.
Yeah.
And as many people as we have now, like that's a lot of breeding back and forth. So like chances are that our ancestors already are each other's ancestors. And so on one level, I kind of switched over to looking at it as those were the ancestors that I had known. These were new family I was meeting. And so when you meet a long lost family member, there's awkwardness, right? Because you feel like you should be that connected, but you're not. And so you have to learn each other's language and learn about each other's background and blah, blah, blah. And so I think like part of the shift was looking at it that way, of like, oh, I'm just meeting new ancestors, new family. And then also time spent in it in a very literal way. And the bottle trick is great. So like if you can get like for me with the water, I did sand and the salt water in it, and maybe like a shower, and then I took that home, and it's literally my back home. So like magically speaking, when I need to ground, when I need to reconnect with home, I have it with me. So I can literally hold home. And then that can be used in other ways too. Like, and from then on also, because my friends and family started knowing I was doing this, I started getting gifting to all kinds of things. Like, do I have it close with me? No, I think it's probably somewhere else right now, but I think it's back in here. but my sister-in-law knew that, you know, I was doing that with the bottle. So she found this really cool antique bottle. It was like an oil pourer, and she put a bunch of black sand from a different beach in there. And so it's literally just black sand that I can use from back home that I can either hold and keep for the energy or use in spells or something like that.
I love black sand.
Yeah. And they're like, I had a friend who, there was a really bad storm in Virginia and a bunch of trees went down, pine trees. We don't really have a lot of pine trees up here. They don't withstand the deep roots, I guess.
We have tons of pine trees where I'm at.
It's like, well, but you're also more south.
Yeah, I'm in Chillicothe.
I'm more north. We have more of like the evergreen
cypress. That
yeah. And so, and that's one of the first things I noticed. I'm like, where is all of the pine tree? Because back home, they are everywhere. Everything is coated in pine needles.
Yeah,
and pine needles and gumball trees and things like that. Yeah. And but up here, you know, I see a gumball tree every now and then. I remember for a while I do this full time, but I was working part time delivering pizzas to like build the business at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you do what you got to do. And I remember I was delivering pizza to somebody, and I parked by their gumball tree so that as I was going back, could open up the door and just kind of like scoop some balls in the car real quick. And
in my old neighborhood, I scooped up pine needles. So yeah.
But like scavenger hunt. But no, I have friends who will send walnuts. Me like that lightning storm that happened that took down a bunch of pine trees. She sent me like a ton of pine needles that had that storm energy, and you know, and so like it's things like that. Like people are, you know, what do we get Cris for Yule? Like, well, if you're in Virginia, just get me Virginia.
Yeah.
Like, just give me pieces of Virginia. Yeah, but like in terms of here, you can do the same thing too. Like here being Ohio, you can you can ask obviously to bring parts of those things in and work with them a bit at a time. You know, and I know you talk a lot about homesteading and things like that. And so like also on that level, it'd be really easy to, as you are planting a specific herb or plant, get to know the properties of that plant, work with that plant and build a rapport. Because for me, even though I have like, you know, seed in a jar, it's not something I use. It's something I work with. And to me, that's a different vocabulary and approach entirely. Like I'm not wielding it. I'm working with it. It's a relationship. Right. And so like, as you're planting those plants, as you're working with that land, as you're working with your trees and, you know, all of this, and like you're building a relationship, you're putting time in. And so like, I would say also that is like, look to how you can build relationships with that land while also giving you that peace of mind of home.
Yeah. Yeah. So many people don't look at it like that. And that's so important because I think you get so much more out of it when you look at it like that. Like, I think I can remember growing my first garden and talking to my plants more than I did anybody else.
Yep.
But just, you know, you get so much more out of that energy and that growth and just building that relationship and having that relationship.
Spend so much time there, you know?
But it's feeling the energy. It really is. And I think that's the thing.
It's feeling the energy, and it's also like taking note or the awareness in things. Like, so let's say a plant, you know, has too much water, being able to know what that looks like and, you know, how to deal with that is not just the energy. It's also like noticing the signs of things. And that again takes attention. It's like, it's literally a relationship. If if your friend walked in and was like, you would be like, what's wrong? What do you need? What's going on? You know, and you're doing the same thing with the plant.
We've lost that connection. So many people. We've lost that connection with people, with plants, with animals.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to like just inspire people to like bring that back and bring that spark back. And
yeah. I mean, I think so. Like, I was more the spirit worker. My mom is more of the green thumb. She is the plant witch. She is the herbalist. And I wish I had the thumb that she has. I am lucky that my aloe lives.
I've killed many an aloe. So,
yeah, like, I don't get me wrong, like, that's why I think the relationship means so much to me, is because I'm just like, I love you, please. Like, whatever you want.
I'll give it to you.
Just please live.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I've taken to just knowing what I need, like snake plants. Snake plants are my friends.
Yes, I love snake plants. Did you know that they emit more oxygen at night to help you sleep better?
Really?
Yep.
Well, no wonder they're my friends. I do love sleep.
They emit more oxygen at night, and they're better if you put them in your bedroom, because in the evening they emit more oxygen. So
yeah, so
we have snake plants in all of our bedrooms. I've killed a few too, but
I love them. My mother, growing up, had a crazy amount of spider plants, and they would always have like tons and tons of babies. And so, like, I've always wanted a spider plant, and I have one, and it's living. It hasn't made many babies, but it's living, and that is an accomplishment for me.
I'll send you one. We've got tons of them. Both of those are really good at filtering your air, though.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a pothos, we have 3 aloe, we have a snake plant, we have 2 peace lilies. Those are my sisters. My sister has a green thumb.
Oh.
2 of the aloe are hers too. 1 of the aloe is mine, and I'm just like, you can do it, little buddy. Look at them. Just follow them.
My problem is when I forget about them or I start not feeling well, and
yeah. Well, that's my issue too. I think is I forget about it, so I need plants that are okay being forgotten about for a while.
Yeah.
A snake plant, which is like, leave me alone.
Yeah. Spider plants are pretty good.
Yeah.
Another one that's not too bad about being forgotten about is a prayer plant.
Prayer plants. Yeah. I haven't had one
about them all over the place. And
I mean, like, I'm talking about like the relationship with things and stuff like that. And like a lot of that was from just sheer envy, because my mother was doing that so beautifully growing up. It was just like our backyard was amazing. And she, being a nurse, and working in that, and then in herbology, and looking at herbalism and how that affects, and like I remember learning about valerian root, because it smelled like my brother's feet.
It stinks awful.
Yeah. And she would take it to be able to get to sleep after like a really busy, crazy shift.
Yep.
And so things like that are how I learned it. So yeah, but I don't know. I've always been envious of the people who have green thumbs. And, I think that's also part of the effort I had to put into here to Ohio, because again, it's a different grow zone. And so I had to like relearn plants up here, like things that I just knew from being with my mom and watching her and being in the forest, I didn't have up here. And so I think sometimes building that relationship, that's how we find connection again. It's just that uncomfortable limbo space in the middle that gets us, I think.
Yeah. Did you have any technical training that helped at all, or was it just more experience
in like plants, or just in general?
In general, I guess.
In general, I have had technical training. I mean, like, obviously, so like energy stuff was technical. My death midwifery was technical. That's a certificate. My priesting stuff.
You said midwife?
Death midwifery. So I'm a certified death midwife.
Okay, so you help people that have lost babies.
No. So, but I do see how you can think that.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I apologize. I'm not familiar with
No,
that
no.
term.
Totally fine, because a lot of people don't know. And so that just gives
Yeah.
me a chance to explain, which is
Yeah.
perfect. So how many people think of a midwife, that phrase, they think of someone who helps birth babies. But really, what midwife meant is it's a middle woman. It's a woman who helps with a transition. It's not necessarily even about babies.
Okay.
So, a death midwife is someone who actually acts as a companion and liaison to someone who's terminally ill. And we do deal with the body post mortem, and some of us are able to, depending on state laws and things like that, to provide sort of like, funeral ceremonies and things like that. And we help the family make sure that they're going to the resources they need. And when they're talking with funeral parlors and things like that, they're educated on things so that they're not kind of getting these really high price tags that maybe they didn't even need. Things like that. But we also work with the person who is dying on a very close level in terms of, what do you need? And it could be something simple like going through photos for them or something like that, because they can't do that. And so, like, that isn't something that I do full time, but it is something that I was certified in, and it has a very deep meaning to me. I went through that after my father's death. I decided, like, nope, there's 11 of us. And I was able to be around a bedside with, all of these other people. And some people pass and don't have one living person around the bedside. Now, the dead are filling it, but one living person. And so that was when I was like, yeah, I need to know how to do this. And so I'm not hospice. That's different. They are medical. I'm not medical. I'm companion and liaison. So basically, I help with the hub to know where you need to go to things, like, the resource hub that I'm like here. And I act as a companion and, read, help, that kind of thing, help the family. Sometimes the family have questions and they can't ask them directly, or the person dying doesn't, feel comfortable talking to them about. So I'm the middleman that'll do it for them, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's really important because, I mean, I've been in the place of hospice.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that people won't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual things that people see towards the end of life.
Yes.
That they're just not comfortable with.
And as a death midwife, we are non-denominational. So we are not one specific religion or spirituality. We tailor to whatever the request is of that person.
So how do you get in touch with people to help them do that? Because I feel like just so much, just as important as a hospice nurse, because like easing that part of somebody that's passing, like how do you get out there and like connect with people?
For myself, I don't get out there. They usually find me when the time's right. Like, I kind of am here. This is my general approach to business anyway, also, is like, I'm here setting at the council fire, doing my thing. Yeah. And when it aligns, if it aligns that you need the medicine that I have for whatever reason, or whatever guidance or connector I act as, whatever channel I act as to move to, like, you'll show up. I don't need to search for you. I'm doing the thing that I'm meant to do. And so are you. And we'll align when we need to align. And that's kind of how I look at that. So I don't actually go out going, hey, I do this, but I do know people who do. And what they usually do is build businesses online. They connect with hospitals. They work with hospice, things like that. And just say, hey, do you need volunteers? Do you need people who are like freelance, basically, that work within your hospital that can come in and spend that time? Kind of how the people that come in with like the pets and, things like that, like death midwives will do the same thing.
Okay.
And what happens is either the hospital pays them, or if it's something separate through the person, then what happens is usually like insurance or something does that.
Okay. So insurance will cover it.
Yeah, not all of them, but there are some that will. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, I feel like that's just as an important service as a hospice nurse, because there's that peace of mind that people need when they're passing. That
Well, and I think that so many, like, and nurses are so inundated with so many patients, especially right now. But
yes,
they have so many things that they have to knock off, and are still expected to have, this bedside manner and take this time with these people, because they are souls, they are, human beings. But at the same time, there's so much on their plate. And so people like us aren't looking to take over or act as, but instead to give them more space to be like, hey, it's okay if you don't have those 5 minutes to sit here, I'll sit here. You do what you need to do, because that's what you have the knowledge of, and I will sit here with this knowledge, and I will do this, and we can help each other.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, I'd never even heard of the term death midwife.
Yeah, some people also say death doula, but
I still never even heard of that.
Yeah.
And like, my dad's a doctor, and my sisters are nurses, and I took care of my great aunt and uncle for years, 24-hour bedside care, and worked with hospice. Never was that service offered. And I can't tell you the peace of mind that probably would have given us.
Yeah.
Honestly. So I think that's a really important thing, to let people know that your service is out there. Like that.
And there are so many. And if anyone watching this is interested in doing that, my teacher's name is Angie Buchanan, deathmidwife.org. Look her up. She goes all over and gives those certifications.
Really? Well, where can we find you? Because I've just had such a fascinating, amazing conversation with you. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you've got to get going.
Yes, so absolutely. So you can find me at CrisAshburn.com, which is, it's spelled like this. So there's CRIS, no H in that. And you can contact me for services. I have ancestral services. That's probably my biggest seller, where it's like basically an all-you-can-eat spiritual buffet of guidance. Like, it's pretty much all the things I do in one. I do mentorship, things like that on there. There are past life stuff. There's tarot readings. There's energy clearings, all kinds of that. There are workshops on there, online classes. There's ritual song, things like that, channeled song. And then you can find me on Patreon under the same name. I'm doing actually those drummings that I spoke about, the full moon drummings with my mother. Yeah. So I have now taken them on, because I'm now the acting priestess in my family. Beautiful. And so I do what's called death tents, and they are very, very heavily based and inspired in basically the same thing that she did growing up. And so I'm continuing it on for the community. And those are twice a month on there. There's live healing rituals on there every month. There's early access to the podcast, which you can find pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, which is the Bonefire podcast. Bonefire is all one word. Okay. Yep. And let's see. Instagram, TikTok. Those are my main ones. I have a Facebook, but the easiest way to contact me and interact with me is Instagram. Okay. Yeah. So, and I also have a Discord via the Patreon too. I'm like in all the time.
Awesome. So if I want to join your Patreon and get in on your drum and your healing circles, what do you charge a month for that? What is that?
So let's see here. So the Discord is $1. The drumming circle specifically is tier 5. So that would be the $40 a month with 2 drum circles, which to me is a pretty good deal, because growing up, when you go to a ritual, it's usually about $20 a head. Yeah. So, for sure. But then also in that, you're getting access to the class that I'm currently building, which right now is the Death and Mourning course, actually. And then let's see, you're also getting access to the early access podcast a month early. You're getting the live ritual. You're getting a special area in the Discord that's like a premium section. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of things. I do a lot of things on Patreon.
You're so incredibly busy. Tell me a little bit more about your death and mourning thing that you're building.
Yeah.
A lot of people have lost people recently with the pandemic, and I know personally I've had a really close loss that I still haven't gotten over. 10 years later. So
it lasts. It's such bull, basically, that people are like, oh, it's been this long, you should be over it by now. Like, no, Nancy, I shouldn't. No. So the death and mourning class, I actually did like a questionnaire. I did a poll to, ask people what I should do next, because what I do is I use Patreon to build the course.
Okay.
So like, for instance, if I'm, I'll do like a lesson a month. And then if people have questions on that or input, or like, hey, what about this thing? Or this just made me ask that, that helps me build the course. And so I then address that as well and build it into it. And so that then once it's done, I take it and release it on my website. And so like, basically they get like really early access sometimes, because sometimes it takes me like a year to slowly build them.
Right.
But right now the death and mourning course is talking about basically these 3 phases or 3 pillars, and they're represented by tarot cards, because I felt like it would be easier if I provided an archetype for people so that they could kind of work with it that way.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on tarot. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. Look, there's a lot of things. But no, like, so the phases are the Tower, the Death card, and Strength, and each has its own spell work with it, its own activities community-wise and also personally. Each one has its own meditation once I'm done, and there will be like a 3-part ritual at the end too, but because it's a ritual course, it's about the doing as well as the intention, and how to move through that, and like how to recognize what you need, and the fact that it doesn't always go 1, 2, 3 in those pillars. You can kind of be in between or popping back and forth, and so like, basically it's also providing a gauge on like you figuring out what you need in those moments from a spiritual place, from a place of someone who is, pagan or something of that leaning. And so, yeah, that's heavily what it's about. It's about like working through grief through a space of mourning from the point of view of a practitioner.
I don't think you can even have to be pagan though. I think you can just be a place of grief and need self-care. I mean, through those stages.
There are definitely the things that I call spells, or the activities could absolutely be done.
Prayer spells. I think they're the same thing.
I think they can be. Yeah. I think prayers to me are closer to like petitions.
Yeah. I suppose so.
Specifically. But I think the intent behind it, the general idea of it is very similar. Yeah.
That's the thing that I really just, want people to take away, that there is so much more similar between all of us, and like, it doesn't have to be black and white. Like you said at the beginning, like there's this gray space that I've walked in my whole life, like you said, that you've said. And I feel like that's really where a lot of us really are at. We don't have to go, well, I'm this or I'm that, because behind closed doors, we're all inquisitive. We're kind of like, oh, well, what's this? Or, oh, what's that? Well,
and I just think as humans, we were built to be so beautifully complex and also divinely simple. And like, why wouldn't we explore that on some level and like honor that complexity and that simplicity? And you can't do that from only one side,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Cris. I really appreciate your time. I don't want to keep you anymore.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. I loved it so much. And we'll put all of your links below.
All right, awesome.
Make sure you send me all of them so I don't lose any of them.
I got you.
I want to be able to make sure everybody can find you, because I'm really fascinated by the whole death doula or death midwife. Like, I just think like it's so helpful.
There's so many of us out there, and it's multiplying like crazy. So I mean, you search the keyword and it's out there. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and the fact that insurance might cover it, and the fact that so many families that are going through it need help. Like,
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Yeah. And, also
it.
just keep in mind during this, like, we work within whatever the state rules are, and state rules change around death. Things like who can handle the body, that kind of stuff. Like,
Sure.
So there are also different limitations depending on where you are,
Right.
which could change how many people are there in terms of the practice, and, or like what their abilities to do are within that. But most of us are very companion based and will help, because just basically we have probably gone through it ourselves and want to be there because we don't want people to feel like they have to go alone.
Yeah, sometimes you just need somebody to hold your hand and just sit there with you.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much power and magic in that. And, we've been talking about being connected this whole time.
Yeah.
That's a major connection. We celebrate, we gather and huddle around when a baby is born into the world. And so why do we not gather and celebrate that life and each other and our connection in that same way when someone leaves?
Yeah.
And I should say not leaves, but is transformed or moved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're still there.
Mm-hmm.
They're still there.
Absolutely, they are. Yeah.
We all feel them.
Yeah, every night my dad tells me, pull those covers shut. It's dark outside. Like right now, that.
I'm
going to get fussed at as soon as it ends.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, my great aunt, she fusses at me, and my partner's mom, don't even go there.
Yeah.
But all right, hon. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and we'll link everything below so everybody can find you. It's been amazing talking to you face to face.
Yes, I had tons of fun.
Absolutely.
And we went all over. We had so many good topics.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. It was great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I will put everything below, like I said, and we will talk again soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.